October 1858, Moline, Illinois. Consistency is what he demanded, but some days it was more difficult to achieve than others, and it was one of those days. John Deere was working among those in his vast shop that polished the steel, but something was making it more difficult to achieve the level of polish that set apart the Moline plows manufactured here. The good news, he thought, was that the steel was likely to be more lasting as it was very hard. But the bad news was that the polishing would take longer. He looked up and saw the visitor approach. "Joe, welcome. It's good to see you again." Joseph Fox fit in alongside Deere and the workmen in the shop. He dressed like a blacksmith, and his rangy features were evidence of sustained hard work. He guessed that Fox was in his 40s, perhaps about 10 years younger than himself. "Good day to you, John," he said, taking in the shop. "I knew I wanted to see this place, but it's much bigger than I expected. How many do you have working for you?" 70, or 71 if you count me." "It looks to me like you should count." Deere had been working there for most of the day and was every bit as grimy as the men around him. "Yeah, let's go someplace where we can sit down and talk." He'd met Fox 1 month before at the Illinois State Fair in Centralia. Fox had demonstrated his steam plow there by plowing a strip of land. The invention hadn't traveled very far, perhaps 50 feet, but the sight of a machine rather than a horse pulling a multi-bottom plow brought shouts and wild huzzas from the crowd that watched it. The idea of using a steam engine to pull a plow wasn't new, but the ability of a steam engine to move machines other than railroad cars and paddle wheel boats hadn't been capably demonstrated until that steam plow. Fox steam plow was a monstrous thing to behold. The plowing gear was attached to the back of a platform that held the steam engine, which had to be about 15 feet in length. That engine imparted power to a driving drum that was about 6 feet long and 5 feet in diameter. At the front were 2 forward guide wheels that steered it. The plows at the rear of the machine could be raised or lowered by a chain arrangement. He poured water from a pitcher in the meeting room into 2 glasses as Fox took a seat. "How long have you been working to create a steam plow?" "Quite some time, I'm afraid to say." "I started taking an interest in steam engines about 7, maybe 8 years ago. I took time to meet with others who were making them, and I started working on a smaller profile engine that could drive a wheel." "Have you always been mechanical?" "Sure. I enjoyed working for a local blacksmith more than I did helping on my family's farm. And they encouraged me, but I've always wanted to make new things instead of just fixing somebody else's old things." "Is this your first product?" "No. I created a spreader for lime. A rotary platform spins fast enough to spread it evenly instead of a farmer needing to do it. 1 shovel at a time." Deere liked how Fox thought. Labor-saving devices were the future. "That seems a clever idea, though you don't see lime spread on fields here too often. Compared to what I saw years ago in New England, anyway." "Yes, I've had some luck selling them, but it's limited by how many farmers use lime. But everyone uses a plow, so I thought, with my next invention, I'll aim for a bigger opportunity. I think I'll be able to sell thousands." "I appreciate your ambition, Joe, but how about if we aim a little lower, for the next year anyway?" "What do you have in mind?" "The Illinois Central Railroad is offering a $3,000 prize for a workable steam plow for demonstration at next year's state fair. That caught my interest." "Mine too, of course. Naturally, I intend to enter a steam plow that's improved from the model you saw last month." "Do you intend to enter your own steam plow, John, to compete with mine?" "No, I do not." "But you've considered it, haven't you?" "Some, sure, Joe. I aim to continue to produce the best plows, but I don't think I could get to the same place with steam engines, and I did play with the idea some. All it led to was more admiration for what you've done." "I appreciate that, John. But why don't we think bigger than a competition for $3,000? I mean, that money could go a ways towards further developing the steam plow, but shouldn't a manufacturing business be developed to build and sell them? The opportunity is so much bigger than the competition. Perhaps steam plows should be built right here, John. What do you think?" Why not build your own shop, Joe? You build steam engines, and I'll build the plows." "A fine idea, John, really, except for one defect." "Which is?" "I have no funds to build a shop. I continue to fund work with these competition prizes and the fees I charge for demonstrations, but it's not enough. To build a proper shop and business, I mean. All the bankers talk about is the panic. No loans for new businesses. Deere sympathized with Fox. The failure of a bank in Ohio the year before had led to a spiraling financial panic across the country. Banks shut off almost all new loans to businesses, including Deere's. My money hardly keeps up with the current business, Joe. Money's always hard in this country. We get by, but that's about all. So you don't want to work together? That's not what I'm saying, Joe. I would enjoy working with you, but as a way to test ideas and learn, and to see if there's a good business opportunity for steam plows. See if there's an opportunity, John? Really? Think of that crowd's reaction last month. Doesn't that excitement point to opportunity? Maybe. But I think their reaction was prompted by the same wonder and curiosity that struck me at the time. It was kind of a shock to see a plow being pulled by something other than a horse. Novelty like that can lead to business, of course, but there needs to be a usefulness, a valuable usefulness that extends beyond the time when the novelty wears out. Plowing more acres for every hour of the day? That's valuable, John, and useful. And steam engines don't require oats and hay. What farmer wouldn't like that? Oh, farmers will like the idea, Joe. That doesn't mean they can afford it, though, even if they'd like to. We're hoping to eventually get to two-bottom plows, for example, but most farmers don't even seem quite ready for that, or at least willing to pay. And you've got what, a six-bottom plow being pulled by a steam engine? A six-bottom model today, but next year I'd like an eight-bottom. How about this, Joe? I'll help you build that eight-bottom plow. I'll do it with my own funds, and it'll be better than what you would build. No offense, but we do know how to make plows, though never anything that big. But we'll build one that'll both cut and turn the soil and pull as easily as possible. And I'll give you one of my best mechanics. He'll work on the plow design, but can help with your steam engine whatever way is useful. And will you pay for your mechanic, John? Yes, I'll pay the mechanic. Then we win that $3,000 prize next year and figure out what to do from there. All I ask for is a portion of the prize money to reimburse my out-of-pocket expenses for the plow parts and the mechanic's salary. So I'll keep most of the prize money? If we win, I mean. Yes, you can keep the bulk of the money. I guess that seems good, but maybe too good. Why do you want to do it? You don't want to invest in me creating a lucrative business while you only get your money back if we win a prize? I suppose it's a way to learn, Joe. I try never to say never, but I haven't had the best history of keeping business partners, so I'm not sure if you want me as one anyway. I might be just an old blacksmith, but I'd like to learn more about steam plows, and I think that working together with you over the next year is the fastest way to learn, and hopefully to be a help to you too. September 1859, Moline, Illinois. Nearly a year later, John Deere walked over one day to the desk of James Chapman. Chapman had worked at a bank prior to joining him at the business. He was trying to bring some semblance of financial regularity to it. The poor guy. It wasn't an easy job. He also happened to be his son-in-law. Did that make the job more or less difficult? He wasn't sure. Good day, Jim. I've got something for you. Deere removed a check from his coat pocket and handed it to Chapman. That brought a small smile to his face. John, if you'd bring me checks like this every day, it would go a long way to helping our financial troubles. I see it's from the Illinois Central Railroad. Is that the steam plow competition from last month? That's it. Deere had worked with Joseph Fox on an improved steam plow. It had performed well enough at the state fair and at the U.S. Agricultural Society contest in Chicago a few weeks later to win the cash prize. Well enough, he thought. Wasn't all that well, however. I had dinner last night with Tom Miller from the Illinois Central. He brought me the check. He could have just mailed it. Could have, but he wanted to talk to me about another idea. Please tell me it involves more checks on a regular schedule. He'd like to buy 10 steam plows. What does a railroad want with steam plows? The Illinois Central got a big land grant for building railroad from Chicago to southern Illinois. More than 2 million acres of land. So they're working to develop communities and farms along the railroad. More freight is the goal. Miller's in charge of community development, so his big idea is to set up 10 demonstration farms with the newest and best equipment. Labor-saving equipment, you see. How much might one steam plow cost? Good question. I told him it would cost a lot. $1,500, maybe $2,000. Times 10, John. I think you've got the biggest order ever for this business this morning. When might they pay? Miller offered to write me a check right there at the dinner table for whatever I said we needed to get started. Let's have a look at that check, please. I told him not to write it. I think I know where this is going, but I suppose I'm to ask you why. We don't make steam plows, Jim. The plows part we do, though. Get Fox in to make the steam engines. He'd like that. But I told Miller I wasn't confident that the steam plow was workable now or could be in the future. Chapman picked up the award letter that accompanied the check. It says that the Fox Deere steam plow is, I quote, the machine which shall supersede the plow as now used and accomplish the most thorough disintegration of the soil with the greatest economy of labor, power, time, and money. That's not the most elegantly worded award, but the Illinois Central seems to think it's feasible. The steam plow did all right, but it was just moving through a show ring. It can move over a flat and firm surface steadily. But when Fox tried to turn up a little patch for plowing, there was all kinds of problems. One day he got maybe 40 feet plowed, and the linkage between the engine and the gang of 8 plows gave way. Did we build the linkage that broke? No, Fox did. Anyway, it got fixed up in the next hour. But it rained lightly. The dirt wasn't even all that wet, but it bogged the machine down. Couldn't pull the plows at all. Fox tried to fasten wood strips to the driving drum for more traction, but that didn't work either. Does the engine need to be bigger? It needs to be able to pull more, for sure, but bigger is no good. I think it weighs close to 10 tons already. I just don't see steam engines working in the fields. When they're on a railroad engine, the tracks make the rolling of the wheels consistent, and the inclines don't change much. Or on a paddle boat that's on the water, it's mostly flat and consistent too. But think about pulling a plow. The fields aren't flat. The power needed to pull the moldboard through the dirt varies from one spot in the field to the next. I'm no mechanic, John, but surely steam engines will improve. I'm sure they will. Fox improved the engine in the last year, just like we improve our plows every year. Stepwise improvement isn't enough. Something actually useful to a farmer would have to weigh maybe 3 tons or less and be capable of pulling a 2 or 3 bottom plow. I'm not sure I can see a pathway for Fox or any mechanic to make that kind of progress, even in the next 10 years. Since the panic set in, John, you know that banks haven't increased our credit. I'm hoping mightily that in the next 6 months that might change, but I don't know. We've barely kept up paying our workers and suppliers. But you keep making more plows. I'm just saying that a sizable check from the Illinois Central for steam plows, that would really help. A year ago, the banks were ready to shut us down and foreclose. About 1 year earlier, the failure of a life insurance company in Ohio had precipitated a series of events that came to be called the Panic. Chapman didn't care about an insurance company in Ohio and banks in New York, but apparently when they sneezed, all the other banks in the country got sick. Credit for businesses like his had virtually dried up. Chapman had been able to assure banks enough to secure some new loans, but not nearly in the amounts that the business needed. Many small manufacturing businesses had been forced to close due to a lack of credit or not being able to pay the loans that were being called by the banks. Without you here, Jim, I think they very well might have foreclosed on us. Maybe just think of the 10 steam plows Miller wants to buy as another competition. Something we can do for the amusement, but we'll get paid for the amusement. Just tell me you'll think about it, John. Deere smiled at his financial officer and son-in-law. All right, Jim, I'll give it more thought. October 1859, Chicago, Illinois. The following month, John Deere was escorted into Tom Miller's office at the Illinois Central Railroad's well-appointed downtown location. He traveled there to inspect a new shipment of steel that had arrived that week. Miller had asked him to meet to discuss steam plows. John, welcome. I trust your stay in Chicago's been good? Yes, Tom. A buyer backed out on a shipment of steel from Pittsburgh that had been shipped here. I came to take a look and bought it. For a good price, I imagine? Yes, it was too good an opportunity to pass up. Have you had enough time to fully consider building us 10 steam plows? I have. I do appreciate your interest and willingness to invest in such an invention, but I lack confidence in the invention, either in its current state or what I can envision it becoming with improvements. You should approach Joseph Fox with the same offer. It's just the opportunity he's been searching for. Will you stay involved in the project if Fox takes the lead? No. Do you lack confidence in Fox? No, not really. Then why not stay involved? I intend that the project will be financially lucrative for you, though I understand the request is, well, irregular. Tom, I've been working on plows for a little more than 20 years now. When I started making steel plows, my goal was to put out the best plow ever made. And every plow we've made has been better than the ones that came before. There's no such thing as a perfect plow, at least that I know of. But my work every day is to get a little bit closer to that perfect plow. And isn't the steam plow closer to the perfect plow, I mean? The idea of it may be, but not the reality. The steam engine is too cumbersome to work with in fields and too expensive for farmers to afford anyway. When I first saw Fox steam plow move, I knew it was a glimpse into the future, but that future is still far away by my reckoning. Have you shared this thinking with Fox? I have. Can you share his reaction? He's very determined to make the steam plow a workable invention and business, so he didn't find my opinion in alignment with his. My advice to him was to turn his great energies to another invention or line of work, not to let a decade of fruitless effort turn into 2 decades of the same. I was told by others to expect frankness of character and expression from you, John. More than frankness, I'd say. I will never be accused of being diplomatic, Tom. But it makes relations easier, at least from my perspective. I still intend to start the 10 demonstration farms, John. But I'll heed your judgment and forego pursuing steam plows. But will you grant me one more request? Can I place an order for Deere plows? You certainly may. Assuming, of course, you're still willing to put down a deposit. Tractors. Technology that took time. By the 1850s, the steam engine was firmly established as a technology, powering water vessels, railroad engines, and early manufacturing facilities. It was natural that ideas about how steam power could be used in agriculture would be in the air. On the same month, September 1859, the Joseph Fox steam plow using John Deere's plows won the Illinois Central Railroad competition. An extremely tall, somewhat homely man gave a talk at a Wisconsin State Agricultural Society event in Milwaukee. The man had gained a degree of national celebrity for a series of debates with U.S. Senator Stephen Douglas of Illinois, but not many in the audience knew that day that he would be elected President of the United States a little more than 1 year later. Abraham Lincoln devoted much of his talk that day not to political issues, but to agriculture and the need for technological improvements. Animal power was becoming obsolete, he argued. The successful application of the steam power to farm work is desired, especially the steam plow, Lincoln said. Lincoln had not actually seen a steam plow, but he'd read about them and thought their future was near. His prediction didn't seem a stretch at the time. American agriculture was on a pathway to mechanization. Cyrus McCormick's reapers, manufactured in Chicago, were already in wide use. Horse-drawn mowers and rakes helped with haymaking. Grain drills and cultivators were in use at the time as well. But the greatest American president's prediction for the steam plow ultimately did not come to pass, though certainly inventors like Fox continued to experiment. 1 year after Fox had worked with Deere, he demonstrated another version of a steam plow at the Illinois State Fair, but it performed so poorly that the competition committee decided that the rig could not be practically substituted for animal power in plowing and other farm work, and they refused to grant an award. As Deere had intuited in 1859, over the coming decades, inventors could not devise a satisfactory power-weight ratio. To get enough power to pull equipment through the soil, steam engines needed to be gigantic in size and weight. No less than Henry Ford, who would eventually play a significant role in tractor commercialization, experimented with steam power when he was young. Some histories of Ford note that in the 1880s he built a farm locomotive, a steam engine attached to an old mowing machine that his father owned. It apparently ran for 40 feet and then stopped for lack of steam pressure, never to run again. The dream of a steam plow, what we today call tractors, would not be realized until a new type of engine was invented, the internal combustion engine. Belgian engineer Jean-Joseph Etienne Lenoir produced a gas-fired internal combustion engine around 1860. German Nicholas Otto, OTTO, began working with Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach to patent the compressed charge four-cylinder engine in 1876. Another German, Karl Benz, patented a two-stroke gasoline engine around the same time and would in the 1880s begin the first commercial production of a motor vehicle with an internal combustion engine. In 1893, Henry Ford attended the Columbian World Exposition in Chicago and was captivated by a two-cylinder engine mounted on a cart by the same Gottlieb Daimler. The 59-year-old German would receive an award for the exhibit. This inspired the 30-year-old Henry Ford to start experimenting in his shed with his own internal combustion engine, noting its superior potential to steam power, the subject of his previous experiments. And oh my, where that would lead. John Deere passed away in 1886, but his relentless focus on continuous improvement survived him and the company led by his son Charles. The development of the internal combustion engine in the 1890s and the first decade of the 20th century led to a frantic startup activity in automobiles, much of it centered in the Midwest. The development of tractors would lag behind automobiles, but not by much. The desire for lower labor costs and the increased productivity soon relegated horses to their modern-day role as companions rather than co-workers. The technology stars finally aligned to make tractors feasible, and the race to develop and market commercially successful tractors was, in a word, dramatic. Neil Dahlstrom, archivist at Deere & Company today, captures this history wonderfully in his book called Tractor Wars. We'll hear more from Neil in a later episode. By the first decade of the 20th century, the tendency of manufacturing businesses to maintain their focus on relatively limited product lines was beginning to give way to a more conglomerate-like model. J.P. Morgan, the Wall Street finance mogul who had helped form such dominant businesses as U.S. Steel and Standard Oil, turned his attention to farm equipment. In 1902, when the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company, the Deering Harvester Company, and three smaller firms were consolidated into the International Harvester Company, the fourth largest corporation in the United States, with an 85% market share in harvester equipment. International Harvester was much bigger than Deere & Company at the time, paying out in dividends as much as Deere had in total revenues. The two companies had avoided direct competition for more than 70 years, but, quote, "Of course, if the plow people went into the harvester business, we might find ourselves drawn into the plow business," said Cyrus McCormick. Tractors would represent the new frontier that created competition among farm equipment manufacturers. In April 1912, the Deere Board of Directors passed a resolution committing themselves to the development of a new machine they called a tractor plow. The tractor's time and name had finally come. But there was much at risk in bringing this new technology to agriculture. Farm equipment makers and aspiring tractor entrepreneurs needed only to look at the automobile industry. Henry Ford's company sold about half of all automobiles in the 1910s, but Midwestern manufacturing towns like Moline were littered with failed automobile startups. Charles Deere had lost personal money investing in one in Moline. Many companies were ahead of Deere in tractor development and commercialization. Emerging automobile titan Henry Ford played a significant role as well. In 1915, Ford announced his long-awaited plan for a farm tractor at an event in Des Moines, Iowa, aiming to put it on the market at a low price of $200. Ford's reputation, owing to the huge success of the Model T, would overshadow the tractor market for the next decade as he started a new business that put a tractor on the market under the Fordson brand. As the U.S. entered World War I in Europe in 1917, industry sales reached nearly 63,000 tractors, double the number sold the year before, and they were made by 124 companies. But Deere primarily remained in research and development mode at that time, specifically a project to develop an all-wheel drive tractor. By 1918, Deere's attention turned to Waterloo, Iowa, about 150 miles northeast of Moline. The city was a hotbed of manufacturing innovation and entrepreneurship. Waterloo's 128 factories employed 6,000 workers at the time, forming the foundation of the city's prosperity and rapid growth. In particular, Deere's attention was focused on the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company, with a history dating to the 1890s. The company dabbled in tractors for a while and then conducted several years of research and development before selling its first tractors by 1913, when 20 Waterloo Boy tractors were produced. In 1940, the company introduced the Model R Waterloo Boy. That tractor proved immensely popular, as more than 8,000 were sold over time. The company also had great success with the Model N, which was introduced in late 1916. Despite the company's name, the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company's Model R and Model N burned kerosene for fuel. In 1918, Deere & Company purchased the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company for $2.1 million, a significant amount for the relatively small business at the time. Deere's own initial designs had proven unsuccessful, so executives decided to purchase the Waterloo Company because field tests indicated that the Waterloo Boy tractor performed well. Its sales success validated the quality of the product. In 1918, at its historic peak, there were about 27 million horses and mules in the United States. It took decades, until the 1940s, for the number of tractors in the United States to exceed the number of horses and mules as their numbers shrank. Today, there are just over 4 million tractors in use in the United States and 3 million horses, mostly companions rather than working animals. The tractor market share leader in the 1920s was Ford, with more than 40%. International Harvester and its Farmall line of tractors were second, with almost 30%. Deere trailed with 6% market share. By the 1950s, International Harvester was the market share leader with about 30% market share. Ford next at 20%, and Deere third with 15%. It wasn't until 1963 that Deere became the leading producer of tractors in the United States. Today, Deere is the largest farm machinery manufacturer in the world with almost $50 billion in annual sales. It is the most well-recognized agricultural brand in the United States and arguably in the world. And the source for that recognizable leaping deer logo, "Nothing runs like a deer"? It was conceived by John Deere and Melvin Gould in the late 1870s. No doubt, John Deere would marvel at the dollars involved in his business today, but I think he'd marvel even more at the tractors built by his business. The steam plow John Deere had worked with Joseph Fox in the 1850s probably had 20 to 30 horsepower with its 10-ton weight. The 1980 Waterloo Boy tractor had 20 horsepower and weighed about 3 tons. Today, at Deere's manufacturing facility in Waterloo, Iowa, tractors with greater than 600 horsepower regularly roll off the assembly lines. Now let's back up to 21 years before John Deere's fateful meeting with Joseph Fox. In 1837, Deere, a recent immigrant to the frontier of Illinois from his native Vermont, found a broken steel saw blade at a sawmill. His thoughts ran to the difficulties of farmers breaking the heavy prairie sod using the types of plows that had worked in the lighter soils of New England. He cut off the teeth, formed up that saw blade over a wrought iron mold board, and polished it. He found that the heavy prairie sod soils would fall away from steel much better than coarser iron, and the plow was lighter and easier to handle. 20 years later, his attention shifted for a brief time to a future that correctly envisioned what we today call tractors. But timing is everything, and John Deere correctly intuited that the time of the tractor had not yet arrived. There may be products and people that can correctly be labeled as overnight sensations, but there aren't that many. A feasible tractor that could be used by a majority of farmers was more than 7 decades in the making. As a more recent entrepreneur, Bill Gates reportedly once said, "Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. John Deere worked on his products for more than 50 years. What do your next 50 years look like?